Hey everybody, welcome back to Record-ology. Okay, this is gonna be fun. I've been looking forward to this show for some time. I'm excited to share with you this episode. Before we get started, in fact, as the intro is rolling, do me a favor, go on over and give me a thumbs up, then subscribe and hit the bell notification so you don't miss a single thing. Sometimes I get these questions about stuff we've covered multiple times, so I want to make sure that you are getting those videos. The videos are finding you, so definitely do that if you haven't done so already. The vast majority of you watching are not subscribed, so let's change that and give me a thumbs up and subscribe, please. I would appreciate that. Okay, what are we doing today? We're talking about the difference between direct drive turntables and belt drive turntables. You've probably heard the difference and kind of wondered what it means and all that good stuff. We are going to talk about that. We're gonna give you some samples of both so you can compare, as well as tear apart a direct drive turntable and see exactly how it works. You're not gonna wanna miss this.
Welcome to Record-ology.
So what is the difference between a belt drive and a direct drive? In fact, what does that even mean? So one of the main components of a record player, we're taking this sort of no-name one as an initial example. We'll take a look at a direct drive unit a little bit later in more detail. But just to begin with, this is a good example piece. So this thing right here that spins, this is called the platter. And the platter is what the record sits on. And so the platter spins the record. And the way it does that is with an electric motor. An electric motor is hidden inside the unit in most cases, unless you get into very high-end units that have an external motor. And I'll explain why that is in a minute as well. But for the most part, you're not going to see the motor, but it is there. And it needs to spin this platter in some form or fashion. And there are two ways to do that. Okay, so we know that the platter needs to rotate. That's a necessity of every record player. So why would you want to use a belt drive or a direct drive? It's pretty simple, actually. A belt drive separates the motor from the platter itself with a rubberized belt. Why you would want that is electric motors don't have perfect speed. They have what's called cogging, which are little jerky movements that they make by nature. Even higher end units have some level of cogging, and you don't want inconsistent, jerky, herky-jerky speed transmitted to your platter because that will translate into distortion in the audio. Electric motors also make a little bit of noise, so you don't want that noise coming through the sound because it can be picked up by the cartridge through the platter. One thing that having a belt between the motor and the platter does is it isolates the speed inconsistencies and the motor noise. Now, one thing that happens with a belt drive turntable is the belt can slip, which you obviously don't want. So turntable manufacturers create low torque motors to compensate for this. But a direct drive turntable, on the other hand, has a high torque motor and can come up to speed a lot faster. How does a direct drive turntable work? Essentially, the motor, instead of being connected to the platter via a belt, is directly connected. How is it connected exactly? We're going to see when we tear down the direct drive unit here in a little bit. While audiophiles like belt drive turntables, oftentimes DJs prefer direct drives, and even some people that just listen to music like a direct drive turntable as well. But they represent a very small portion of record players sold today. One of the concerns of a direct drive turntable is that motor noise being transmitted through and those speed variations being transmitted through, like we talked about before. Although modern manufacturing techniques and components have largely eliminated the issues that were experienced in years past. So how can you tell the difference? Well, let's take a look at two very similar turntables, one being belt driven, the other being direct drive, and really see what they look like under the hood initially. Let's just take the platters off to start with. Now, as you can see here, the Crosley C100, and by the way, this is a great turntable, a great starter turntable, even a great mid-range turntable. Gives you a lot of the functionality that the LP120 does from Audio-Technica, but at a much lower price. You're only sacrificing belt drive versus the direct drive of the LP120, the quartz lock, and you don't have 78 speed. It is a 2-speed turntable, unfortunately. However, Crosley also makes the C200, which is the direct drive variant. The C200 is pretty much identical to C100, except it has direct drive. You guessed it, instead of belt drive. So if you want a true LP120 killer, if you don't need that third speed, if you can live without the quartz lock, you want all the other great features it has, strobe, pitch adjustment, built-in preamp, all that stuff, the ability to upgrade your cartridge easily, a good rugged turntable made by the same OEM that makes the LP120 and a bunch of your favorite turntables. This is a great turntable because it's a lot cheaper. It costs a lot less than the LP120, which, by the way, is pretty much out of stock right now and very hard to find anywhere. So let's take a look at this guy. We've reviewed the C200 before. If you want to watch that full video, check the link in the description below, as well as the C100 Bluetooth variant and the original. I just so happen to have a brand spanking new C200 here to reward you for making it this far into the video so far. We got some surprises coming your way, so don't miss that. But one thing I wanted to tease was an upcoming show we're going to be doing about a new cartridge that Crosley is releasing. You're going to want to watch that. It's going to be interesting. Okay, so again, we're not going to do a full unboxing review of this because we have done that. But at the same time, I wanted to show you what's in the box. And it's fun to unpack stuff together and just see what that experience is like. So let us do that. So you don't have to sit through all the detail regarding a setup and all that stuff for a new turntable, but it is kind of fun to see what's in the box. Always do this upside down. Always, always, always do it upside down. All right, this comes with a felt mat, but obviously you can upgrade that, which I'd recommend doing. Polycarbonate dust cover. This one is sort of a bluish kind of tint to it. It's kind of hard to see in this light. Very dingy light, by the way. We got snow all day and all night coming our way here in Denver, but that is indeed a slightly blue tinted polycarbonate dust cover. Got the user manual, some accessories, audio cables, and then the unit itself. So we've got the counterbalance, plastic 45 adapter, and the head shell assembly. We'll take a look at what cartridge you get here in a minute. And then the unit itself. Another difference between this and the LP120 Audio-Technica that's again made by the same OEM is the fact that this is not weighted. The plinth is hollow, so it's lighter, although it's got decent heft to it. It's not like freak you out light. Like we've picked up some turntables where the plinth without the platter, without the everything on it, it's just so light and scary. This one is not that way. It's got a decent amount of heft to it. But unlike the LP120, when you go to pick it up, you're like, holy cow, it doesn't feel so heavy. That's because, similar to Beats by Dre, the headphones, the LP120 just has dummy weights in it. Okay, so we've unpacked it. Let me go ahead and put everything together off camera. Again, this isn't a full review of this product, but it is a great opportunity to look at a direct drive turntable, and we're going to tear this apart and see how it works. Let's recap really quickly before we tear it apart. So unlike the C100, the belt drive version, the C200 is still Gen 1. And what I mean by that is it still has the base cartridge. It has the Audio-Technica 3600L, which is nothing wrong with it, but it is, of a $240 turntable, it's got a $10 cartridge, which is a good one, but it's, a weak link, as it were. So luckily, this is a 1/2 inch, standard mount head shell assembly. You can put on any cartridge you want, and you'll be good to go. One thing I learned about this is kind of interesting is a lot of people were buying the C200 over the C100 initially because you had to get the C200 to get the black version. The C100 originally didn't come in black. You could get it in silver, and I think there might have been another version. I think it was just silver, actually. So Crosley actually decided to offer a black version of the C100 that we reviewed, the Bluetooth version a couple months back. And that was the other thing, is that this does not have the Bluetooth out functionality yet. So it's a little bit more basic, but all the nuts and bolts, the essentials are there. So our on and off, start and stop, our switch speed, our strobe light, 2 speed markings for 2 different power grids if you're on 50 hertz or if you're on 60 hertz. You got the pitch slider over there, the speed select right there, anti-skate, which really does work, counterbalance, and a cheap plastic 45 adapter that really needs to be a metal one. Please hear me, Crosley, if you happen to be watching this. Put that in there. It was such a nice touch on the LP120 first gen. Now even those you have to get the 1240 series to get the aluminum. Now Crosley does sell an aluminum one, but they should just throw it in there. I mean, it's an expensive investment you're making, in my opinion. So under the Platter, and the Platter is shared between the C200 and the C100. Openings here. It uses, like I said, the same Platter, so it's got the openings so you can attach the belt back here, but as you can see, there's no motor and no belt, and these two finger holes. Everything's, in pairs so that the weight is evenly distributed. Looking under the Platter here, it does have the sub Platter. Again, it's the same Platter that they put on the C100. There's not really a reason to change it, but this one does not come with the belt because it is a direct drive turntable. And you can see the channel of where the belt would sit, where that sub Platter would sit, and where this extension area would allow you to put that belt around the motor pulley, which this does not have. One of the things I love about these turntables is you can switch the power supply. They use an AC power supply, so you can go 110 or 220. I think that that's really, really cool. Also, you'll notice that back where the motor would normally be, there's a little piece of tape. So why don't we see what's under that tape? I don't know if we pulled this up the last time or not. So you can see where the motor would sit. It's hard to see with the camera, but I see a circuit board in there. I don't see a motor. So wherever the direct drive motor lives, it's not right there. So before we take this apart, why don't we do a side-by-side sound comparison of what the C100 with its belt drive mechanism sounds like versus the C200 with its direct drive mechanism. Now, I will preface this by saying that the sound testing is going to feature a couple of different cartridges. I didn't think ahead enough to be able to replicate the different cartridges on each unit. So keep that in mind, but let's listen to a little bit of side-by-side sound testing and to see if we hear an audible difference between a belt drive and a direct drive. I'm going to answer that ahead of time and say you won't hear a difference, primarily due to the fact that the difference is minuscule. I'm talking minuscule. Secondly, also, another part of that is the fact that YouTube is going to compress the audio. So this audio you're hearing right now is already compressed a couple of times. One of the first things to go in lossy audio compression are those little fine, minute details, especially in the upper register, all that good stuff. But let's take a look at that sound test.
I got an island in the Pacific, and everything about it is terrific. I got the sun to tan me, palms to fan me, yeah.
Let me play one when you get through. Okay. Ouch. Kick it, Sid. Kick it.
Boy, he can kick it for my money.
It's amazing how dark a snowstorm can make it, because even though it is broad daylight, the light is significantly lower than it usually is. So I apologize for the harsh ring light, but it was a necessity. Okay, so I've done all of the unscrewing. There was 2 on each side, so a total of 8 screws. Interesting moment here, looking at the bottom panel. This molding must be a shared molding. I'm guessing not only just between the C100 and C200, but possibly other products as well. You can see 3 trim pots here, and we have one for 45, one for 33, but one for 78, and we know this is not a 78 enabled turntable. There's also a DC speed right there, which I have absolutely no clue what that does. I do like the bold markings up here that say line out, that correspond with the line output back there, and the AC in back there as well. Another thing I really like that you can only see from this angle are these really nifty little finger notches. So when you're lifting the turntable in a normal position, when you're picking it up to move it, it's really nice that there's a little inset for your fingers. It feels good. It feels like there's a good place to lift it up. What these things are, I have no idea. If you're a molding expert, if you're a plastics expert, let me know. I have no idea if that's like a remnant. It looks purposeful. It doesn't look like a remnant. Another quick word on the feet. They are pivoting feet with a little slice of synthetic rubber there. All right, we've got it unscrewed. Let's go ahead and lift it off and see what it looks like. Aw, cool. I love this moment. And oh man, I just dumped my screws everywhere. But there's the inside of the bottom of this. You can see only these two right here have these like shafts. That one is just an empty hollow spot. Interesting. It smells like new plastics. Big surprise. All right, let me recalibrate here and we'll take a closer look. By the way, before I forget, I have the felt slip mat underneath this thing to protect that polycarbonate. One bit of advice I would love to give to each and every one of you, or I'm speaking to myself too, to us, is don't put first of all, don't turn your turntable upside down. Don't open it up. You'll void your warranty. You'll probably shock yourself. You could put an eye out. It's just not smart. So don't do what I'm doing, okay? Secondly, if you do what I'm doing, or you have a tendency to stack things like I do, don't think about stacking anything on top of that polycarbonate lid because it will scratch by looking at it wrong. It is so sensitive to scratches. Okay, so this is unique. I mean, this looks different to me than what I'm used to because I've never really looked under the hood of a direct drive turntable before until today. So we're going to learn together. Some stuff is pretty easily identifiable. This is going to be the speed selector switch down here under this circuit board. Right here is where that pitch slider is. This obviously is going to be the drive mechanism. We'll take a closer look at that. Over here is the on and off switch and the strobe light / power switch. There is the power supply. And over here is the tone arm assembly. Let's start by looking there. Okay, there's quite a bit going on here, maybe more than you would expect. You may only think of the wires coming out of the tone arm itself. By the way, the wires go into this metal mesh braid, which is for shielding purposes. Because if you look, those wires run right next to the audio output jacks. So you don't want any cross interference between this and this. That also helps prevent the issue of the preamp introducing noise into the signal. Another thing I want to point out is this right down here, this little guy right there. That is part of the anti-skate. And that will essentially push the tone arm into a neutral position so that it's not introducing bias in terms of where it wants to swing. And again, we've done a lot of videos on that. I'm not going to go into it here. But yeah, that's what we're looking at here. And we've got some lubricant there on the bearing itself. And this is the bottom side of the tone arm lift right here. It's simply a metal arm with a U shape in it. And as you actuate that lever, it rolls that U into position, raising or lowering the tone arm. So that's all pretty cool stuff. Let's look at the preamp since we're looking up close back here. So the preamp circuit is going to be on this board right here. Here is where the audio cable goes in. There is some slack so that, you know, you can't trip over the cable and then end up yanking it out of the circuit board. And check out this filter right down there for the AC power. This is really, really cool. And then over here we have the power supply transformer itself. So again, really, really interesting. Here's a micro switch over here. Love to notice all these little components, this little micro switch right down here. So basically when you rotate the knob on the other side of this, you can hear that click. It actuates this little micro switch. But what we're really here for today is that drive mechanism. So let's look closer at that. Now, like I said before, one of the things that a direct drive turntable needs to do is to have high torque. And the typical little JYK motor may not be able to produce that level of torque. Even still, I was expecting to see a JYK motor in here with a simple gear cogging it directly to that bearing. However, what I am seeing, at least from this perspective, is what appears to be a much larger motor, which is surprising because I know that some of the super high-end Technics turntables actually feature a platter that is essentially the motor. It literally, the platter is the motor. And why is that a good thing? Here's another thing I want to mention too about direct drive versus belt drive. A belt drive turntable motor is going to spin at hundreds of revolutions per minute, and through gearing is slowed down to 33. I shouldn't say it's slowed down, but the affected platter rotation is slowed down. So there's a lot of more cogging that happens in that cycle per second versus a direct drive, which spins at 33 or 45 RPM instead of 1200. So there's something to take into account there as well. Again, with the turntable unplugged, I am going to dig a little bit deeper into here. I think we need to remove this plate. Looks like I really should not try to unplug this because this plug right here is glued here, screwed in there, and cabled over here. So what we'll probably do is try to lift it off. But I got the 4 screws off. Let's see what we can see. Yeah, I think this whole thing is the motor. Okay, I need to take off another screw back here. One of truth, I hope. By the way, don't touch those caps. We had it powered on. And while the voltage may not be that high, you don't want to take a shock. So even after you unplug something, do not touch the capacitors. All right. It's heavy, and it is going to be hard to navigate. So let's see. Can I lift this all the way off? Like that is the motor. This whole assembly. I wish I could get a better shot, but this entire piece here is the motor. In fact, you can see some of the wire, copper wire coils in there. That is amazing. That is really, really cool. And it's literally centered on that main bearing. That is so cool. I'm really impressed. I thought it would be just a cheapo JYK motor, you know, geared maybe with a plastic cog to the middle there. But no, this is a completely different motor. And what's really cool is that it's centered over that spindle. It's not being geared. It's not offset in any way. It is literally rotating at either 33 RPM or 45 RPM. That is so cool. I think that's awesome. So there you go, guys. That is, from a high level anyway, how a direct drive turntable works. And as you can see, it's completely different under the hood, but not so different in the user experience. In fact, you may not even notice a difference if you didn't even know to ask or didn't even think about it. Okay, guys, and that is going to do it for today. Thank you so very much for watching. Again, thumbs up, subscribe if you haven't done so already. Consider joining the Vinyl Nation. Consider the merchandise opportunities, all that good stuff to help support the channel. But mostly I just appreciate you being here and spending your time with me. So would I recommend a direct drive turntable to you? Yes and no. Actually, I'm kind of split down the middle. I don't see a benefit of having a direct drive turntable for most people at the price point we're talking here, because DJs like direct drive turntables, but you can't really DJ on a turntable that's less than $1,000. It's just not recommended. Crosley had the Crosley DJ, which has unfortunately been discontinued. And I think you could get started perhaps with a lower priced direct drive turntable, but really those guys are going to be in the, you know, the Technics 1200 SL kind of range for something like that. For people like us that just want to listen, it's kind of apples to apples, honestly. There's not a huge benefit one way or another at the level that we're talking about here. If you really want to optimize the sound that you're getting, I still think that a belt drive turntable is the best from a sonic perspective. But anyway, guys, I hope you had fun. That's the biggest thing. And that's going to do it for now, guys. So happy record hunting, and we will see you next time.